Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I decrease as you increase. It's all about you. It's not about me. I decrease as you increase. It's all about you, not about me. I decrease as you increase. It's all about you. It's not about me. I decrease as you increase. It's all about you. It's not about me. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope that everybody is having a great and wonderful day. Hopefully, everybody can see and hear me clearly. If you notice, I've been coming on just a couple minutes late because of where I am. Sometimes the internet is going in and out. So thank you for bearing with me in terms of that. So sometimes I have to restart, and so I'm not starting at exactly 11 o'clock. But most of you know that I am a timely person, and I like to start right at 11 a.m. If you're with us for the first time, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining Daring Dialogues, where we dare you to be your best self, where we dare you to think, where we dare you to sometimes change what you think about what you know, and where we hopefully are providing you with challenging content that's helping you to grow and to develop in your own personal life. Good morning, Guadalupe. Good morning. Glad that you were able to join us live today. So, on Wednesdays, if you've been with us for the week, you know that Mondays is motivation, and I encourage you to go back and look at Motivation Monday, where we shared some things prophetically, and also we encouraged you in your walk. Tuesdays is Teachable Tuesday, where we focus on Black history primarily. Wednesdays is relationships, where we're talking about not just romantic relationships, but also interpersonal relationships, healthy relationships, how to build healthy relationships, how to appreciate the healthy relationships you're in, all of that good stuff. And Thursdays is Theology Thursday. Right now, we're talking about how Africa shaped the Christian mind. So we're looking into that and looking into the origins of Christianity and how it didn't start with Europe, that it actually started with Africa. And unfortunately, for some reason, they don't really teach that in a lot of the seminaries in the United States, which is a problem to me. But, hopefully that problem will begin to be resolved within the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years as more people come to desire correct theological content to be taught to them. Uh, if you want to find out who's actually kind of on the forefront of that, you can check out the hashtag Seminary While Black. Seminary While Black is a hashtag you can follow, and you can find out about some of the protests that have already been going on concerning the education that's being taught in seminaries in the United States. People are already engaged in that. And then also on Fridays, we cover what we like to call Finance Fridays or Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise, where we're talking about your health. We're talking about your finances. We're talking about things that you can do to build your credit. So, again, we like to cover the whole man. We don't just focus on Sundays, on what we minister, what I minister, my husband and I minister on Sundays, but I spend the entire week hopefully giving you some life application. All right. And for those of you who have been blessed by the life application and who have been giving into what we do with Daring Dialogues, I want to say thank you. Thank you for giving, because it does make a difference. All right. So let's get into today's readings. We have been in the book Labor of Love Labor of Love, and we've been talking about the origins of dating, the invention of dating, because dating is an invention, all right? It is a secular invention. And so we've been going through the history of it, and we are probably about two-thirds through this book. And we are in the section now where we're talking about the yuppies and what happened with the yuppies, the young urban professionals, and how that translated into other titles underneath that. So the Buppies came along, which was the black urban professionals. And it's talking now about how the yuppies changed dating and how they wanted things done in a specific way, which brought us into the era of matchmaking, dating apps, online dating. Most of the things that we see now came out of the yuppie generation. All right, so that's where we are. And then we're going to pick up with our second section on Rhoda. We've been reading the book called 11 by Leonard Sweet. You can actually find him on Twitter. I think he's at Len Sweet. And his book 11 is a very powerful book. It's called 11 Indispensable Relationships That You Can't Do Without. And so we're right between 9 and 10 that we've been covering on both Mondays and Wednesdays. So for you, those of you who are new, those are the two books that we've been reading on Mondays and Wednesdays. Let me get right into continuing our talk about the yuppies. The yuppies. Where are we? I think I had it folded down. I did. All right. So the yuppies actually created a handbook, and that's where we're going to continue our talk and hopefully finish up this chapter today. The section of the Yuppie Handbook devoted to dating and marriage is called Personal Interfacing. Yuppies don't love their lovers. The preamble begins. They love Vivaldi, their new apartments, and the color of the ocean off St. Thomas in January. They have relationships with their loves. According to the handbook, yuppies broke relationships like business deals into 3 stages. They had 3 stages in terms of their relationships and how they related to others. One was getting into, number 2 was working on, and number 3 is getting out. In an article on Yuppie Love in its 1984 Year of the Yuppie issue, Newsweek adopted a similarly arc tone. It can happen anywhere and anytime. You're sitting at a sales meeting and this fabulous looking person stands up and gives a really tremendous presentation, and all of a sudden you know you've just got to have them in your division. All joking aside, many yuppie daters felt despair. In 1985, the Associated Press interviewed a Boston social worker who taught a free course on spouse hunting at the city's Adult Education Center. She recalled that 10 years earlier, most of her students had found being single glamorous. Now they all seem miserable. Urban life is so anonymous, she said. Everyone is dying to know how to meet somebody. Spending long days at the office and 1 or 2 hours a day besides in the gym and personal training sessions, many yuppies found that they had little of themselves left over to invest in a romance. What could you do if doing what you loved took so much time and energy that you had none left for the concept of dating? In the 1980s dating advice manual suggested buying an eye-catching breed of dog to meet other singles. So then, I don't know if you noticed this, but then in the late 80s to early 90s, there were all of these people who became very, very interested in pets and dogs because they were using their animals to a way to go out and be sociable and meet people. The fitness addict could kill 2 birds with 1 stone by taking his or her canine conversation piece for a jog. That is still a thing, my friend exclaims when I read this tip aloud to him. A more efficient approach was figuring out what you wanted in a partner before you started looking. Just as businesses developed to cater to yuppies who were too busy to cook, or wanted to target their specific muscle sets without wasting time, say on rowing, so did new services promise to help you date. To have highly specific taste was a plus. It helped you to speed up your search by narrowing it down. Cookie Silver was short, but she wanted tall. I want tall, she kept telling her matchmaker. When I'm with a short man, we look like munchkins. But this one's a doctor, the matchmaker protested, one of her prospects. When he stands on his wallet, he's over 6 feet. Cookie recounted her story to the Chicago Tribune in 1985. By then, she and the tall man she held out for, an entrepreneur, had met, married, and acquired the local franchise of the video dating service that introduced them. Intro Lens was growing at a quick clip, adding hundreds of users every month and opening several new offices across the Midwest. It was only one of a spate of new businesses offering dating services to yuppie lonely hearts. These promised to help daters find what they wanted in what little time they had. So, we know that dating services had been around since the 1960s. The first primitive forms of computer dating debuted during that decade. Like Facebook, Operation Match was designed by 3 students at Harvard. It allowed curious couples to submit several pieces of information about themselves and what they wanted, have these cross-referenced in a database, and receive a handful of recommended partners. In 1964, an accountant and an IBM programmer in New York unveiled a similar prototype that they called Project TACT, TACT, for Technical Automated Compatibility Testing. It catered to singles on New York's Upper East Side, but these were novelties. The first introduction services to develop viable business models were very low tech. You would sign up, usually after a phone call, and then make an appointment to do an in-person interview with one of the counselors who worked in the office. The counselor would ask you a long list of personal questions about your childhood, your romantic history, your job, your hobbies, and religious preferences, and then whether you yourself had any deal breakers. Would you ever date a smoker? Would you date a divorcee? Within a few weeks, you would start receiving cards in the mail with the names and phone numbers of dating prospects. These would continue arriving as long as you paid a membership fee. If you liked someone after talking on the phone, you could meet in person. The whole thing was basically like outsourcing a Rolodex to a stranger. The personal sections that proliferated in the backs of many newspapers and magazines in the 70s seemed less enticing to yuppie daters of the 80s. Dating services that required so little investment up front were generally suspected of delivering low returns. For singles who wanted more selectivity, video dating then began to offer an alternative. The first video dating services started appearing in the 70s as the prices of video cameras, cassettes, and players fell. At most companies, when you signed up, you would be paired with a counselor. After you filled out the usual questionnaire with basics like your race, your age, your education level, your occupation, and religious beliefs, the counselor interviewed you on camera, hiding themselves off screen. At Intro Lens, Cookie Silver called this part the talk show. When you had finished, she allowed you to view your tape. You could ask to reshoot and edit if you wanted. She labeled the finished product with your first name and filed it in a video library. At best companies, these libraries were very large. After you had made your recording, your matchmaker ran the answers you had put on your questionnaire through a computer database, which generated a list of prospective matches for you. You would make an appointment to pull the videos these singles had made so that you could screen them in a private room. If you liked what you saw, you told the service. The service contacted the person on the tape and offered to show them your video. If you both were interested, you would be introduced. At most companies, these services would run you between $500 to $1,000 per year. Some also offered more expensive lifetime memberships, which were valid as long as you remained unmarried. The first video dating company in the U.S., Great Expectations, was founded in L.A. in 1975 by a mother and son team, Estelle and Jeff Ullman. It expanded quickly, franchising all over California and the West. In 1990, Jeff claimed that Great Expectations was responsible for 6,000 marriages. A current Facebook page for couples who met through the service fondly remembers them as everyone's Jewish mother. In the meantime, the company had inspired a lot of copycats. The first IntroLens office opened in 1979. Between 1980 and 1983, similar services rapidly started multiplying in cities across America. Eventually, video dating services would cater to daters at almost every price point and in every demographic. There was Soulmates Unlimited for Jews in California, and there was Soul Date a Mate for African Americans in or around Massachusetts. In Boston, there was Partners for gays and lesbians, and Maisel Dating for Jewish singles. Washington, D.C. had Today for Singles Inc., which served daters with STDs. In 1988, an exhibition at the Chicago Zoo called Zoo Ark even let visitors play a video dating game on behalf of animals that belong to endangered species. Using a computer connected to the International Species Information System, the resource that professional zookeepers use to do this, the exhibit let visitors browse prospective mates for one of the zoo's bachelors and two bachelorettes. These were white, black, and Asian rhinoceros. In personal ads, computer databases, and video dating tapes of the 80s, we can now see contemporary online dating technology struggling to begin to emerge from their analog. If yuppies had not invented the internet, their personal assistants would have had to invent it for them. These text and VHS predecessors of online dating prepared us. For one thing, they taught us busy singles to focus their romantic expectations, to spell out what you have to offer, what you were looking for, and where you might be likely to find it. Print classified ads already required daters to do this. They forced you to boil yourself down and your desires into sound bites and to know your audience. You could expect different people to read the personals in the back of the New York Review of Books versus New York Magazine. In the African American paper, the Los Angeles Sentinel versus the Beefcake Glossy Exercise for Men Only. You had only a few words to catch the right kind of eye. Jeff Ullman, the Great Expectations founder, traveled the United States offering motivational lectures to anxious singles. When I reach him at his home in Colorado, the writer says, he recounts how he used to boost the confidence of attendees by telling them they should not feel ashamed to be selling themselves. What is advertising? I would ask. Let's look it up in the dictionary. Then he would pull out a dictionary. Advertising. Taking a product or a service and promoting it. I believe that is what you're doing. You're becoming the product and the service. You're the thing, a bag of carbon and water, and you're here because you want to mate, to date, to procreate. Every one of you is advertising yourself. As more and more dating services began using computers, creating databases of clients, and cross-listing them, the imperative to go niche would turn from being a good strategy to a technical requirement. You had to be able to express your personality in exactly the right keystrokes. Daters quickly learned to convert themselves into code. Until the early 1980s, dating services had been seen as slightly pathetic. You can tell how adamantly the pioneers of video dating insisted that their customers were not pathetic. Now, we see the exact opposite. Yuppies had made the work itself glamorous. In doing so, they had made it admirable rather than pitiful to be too busy to have a social or romantic life. The way people talked about video dating reflect a new level of comfort with the idea that courtship was simply another part of the economy. Today, controversial dating services frequently invoke the existence of demand for their services as a moral justification that needs no further explanation. Before the August 2015 data breach that made Ashley Madison the dating site for the cheating spouses, infamous the founder, Noel Biderman, defended it by saying that it simply facilitated interactions that would take place anyway. Seeking arrangement describes the sugar dating, its brokers as relationships on your terms, its promise of convenience, finding a relationship anywhere, anytime, on any device, and advertises ideal relationships that are upfront and honest with someone who will cater to your needs. And so, what happened? It went from simple dating services to singles to people now taking advantage of the idea and the technology, right? And people began creating dating services for people who were committing adultery or people who just wanted to exploit um, what they call irresponsible, what we would call irresponsible sexual activity. So you not only have apps out here that are legitimately trying to connect people who want to have a lasting monogamous relationship, but now you also have, of course, the Pandora's box being open, and now you have apps for all kinds of vices. All right. Of course, the market does not always offer happiness. The idea that new technologies can create a perfect delivery system for human desire set many daters up for disappointment. For some, it also inspired unrealistic expectations. In a video dating tape that is still floating around on YouTube, a thin man with a mullet describes what he is hoping for: someone who is sexy, slim, tight, with excellent legs. He pauses to look into the camera and literally smacks his lips. His was the problem that still confronts daters on many apps and services. The specter of infinite possibility and choice creates hopes that can only be dashed again and again in a search that never ends. Or, as the scripture says, the flesh is never satisfied. Article after article related how brutal video dating was on women. A headline in the Chicago Tribune joked dryly that for a four-figure fee, you can get rejected on a regular basis through an app. The story focused on the plight of an attractive, professional, 40-something-year-old woman recently divorced who was roped into paying $1,400 for a membership from which she never got one single date. Video dating services are great, the authors joked, just as long as either you're a gorgeous woman under 35 with a glamorous career or an average looking man under 65 with an extraordinary job. Even the proprietors of dating services admitted that it was hard for them to help female clients who had passed middle age. Bob Greene, the columnist who coined Yuppie, told the heartbreaking story of a 70-year-old widow named Nancy who drove in from the Chicago suburb of Berwyn to sign up for a service called Sneak Previews Incorporated. My husband died 7 years ago, she told the owner. You get so lonely when that happens. Every year you get lonelier. DeBartolo told Greene that he had not wanted to take her money. He warned the septuagenarian, we really don't have a lot of people who it might be appropriate for you to choose. That's okay, she replied. I don't expect to walk out with a date today. When Greene followed up several months later, he found Nancy at home alone. Like the bars and the speakeasies and the school dances that came before them, computer dating services were simply platforms. Only the technology of courtship was supposed to have improved. Computers promised to rationalize the dating market to clear up inefficiency that kept the supply of yuppie singles from finding its demand. When online dating companies began to take off in the mid-90s, they assembled larger and larger databases and deployed automated processing power. As more Americans got online and it became possible to delegate the work of a cookie silver to only algorithms and a webcam, dating services would become more affordable and more available to virtually anyone who wanted to use them. You could belong to 2 or 3 dating services at one time. By the turn of the millennium, the numbers of members of sites like Match.com and Plenty of Fish had climbed into the tens of millions. In an article that appeared in Wired magazine in 2002, Nerve.com's founder, Mr. Grissom, declared that the ascendancy of online dating was inevitable. 20 years from now, the idea that someone looking for love will not first look online will be silly, akin to skipping the card catalog to instead wander the stacks because the right books are found only by accident. We have a collective investment in the idea that love is a chance event, and often it is. But serendipity is the hallmark of inefficient markets, and the marketplace of love, like it or not, is becoming more and more efficient. Had we come back to the at the dawn of dating, all sorts of people had decried the fact that courtship was moving out of the home and into the anonymous, public world where money changed hands. Policemen had worried that making dates was equivalent to turning tricks on the street. Love was supposed to lie outside the economy, women could only give it away. By the 1980s and 90s, however, respectable people were celebrating the possibility that courtship might be made to behave as rationally as the market was supposed to, via technology that let you do comparison shopping of potential dates from the comfort and privacy of your own home. Recent statistics say that 65% of all recent marriages happen because of an online match. I want y'all to think about that. 65% of new marriages have been as a result of an online match. That is serious. And you have to start asking yourself, what does that mean for the future? What does that mean for future relationships? And we also have to ask, why is it happening? Is it because people don't trust the people in their immediate vicinity? Or are people just saying, I'm lazy and I don't feel like going out and socializing and meeting somebody? Or are we saying that most of the people I already socialize and meet with, I'm already connected to them online? And so I simply search through my friends of my friends. I mean, is that what's happening? I would want to see the more specific data on that, but that is the current statistics is that 65% of recent marriages that have occurred were as a result of the couple meeting online. So what does that mean about your online connections and the importance of who you're connected to and making sure that you know the people that you're actually connected to and you're not just connected to people digitally, but you don't know them in person. The writer says here, the undercover Vice investigators who stalked charity girls in the 1900s and 1910s were horrified by their transactional approach to romance. However, an odd couple that appears all over Hollywood comedies of the 1980s suggests that by then, mass audiences had embraced it. The couple consisted of a prostitute and an entrepreneur. It started with Risky Business, 1983. Does anybody remember that movie? I may be dating myself. In Risky Business, when his wealthy parents leave him alone for a weekend, the high school senior, played by Tom Cruise, phones a call girl, Lana, on a dare. After their night together leaves him in her debt and her pimp steals his parents' Chi-Chi furniture, Tom Cruise must go into business with her to earn the money he needs to buy his heirlooms back. They team up to run a prostitution ring out of his family's home for one night. My name is Joel Goodson, Cruise announces after it has all worked out. I deal in human fulfillment. I grossed over $8,000 in one night. Today, the portrait of the entrepreneur as a young pimp, or rather teen male madam, feels prescient. Had Joel Goodson been born 2 decades later, he might have founded Facebook. Like Mark Zuckerberg, he uses his parents' capital to create a platform where others can exchange attention and emotions so that he can skim off the surplus. In the calling era, the parlor, watched over by the lady of the house, was the inner sanctum of a female world entrusted with taming male tendencies towards aggression, greed, and lust. By the time of Risky Business, the parlor had become a living room and then a pop up brothel. No parents were home. The mythology of the 1980s and early 90s glorified the escort and the entrepreneur as a perfect match because neither had anything he or she would not be willing to sell. In the movie Pretty Woman, Richard Gere puts this bluntly. He says in the movie, "You and I are such similar creatures. We both screw people for money." There was a lot embedded in this crude pun. For one, the idea that at the bottom, the escort and the entrepreneur did the same kind of work. In the late 1970s, the United States continued to deindustrialize, and the country experienced a trade deficit. Unable to keep up with increased competition from Japan and Germany, or to afford the expensive oil that had once powered the industrial production, the United States grew its service sector. Both the streetwalker and the stockbroker both belong to the service sector. In this sense, Richard Gere was right. They were not so different. Yet the service sector itself continued to split into two unequal groups. On the one side was the precarious and poorly paid majority. On the other were finance aristocrats. The kind of work the first did tended to be thought of as female: cleaning, serving food, handling customers, and so on. The kind that the second did was quantitative and competitive in their broad shouldered suits. Its icons only projected masculinity. So while they had their similarities, these lovers were also opposites. They both screwed people, but they had very different power relationships with them and received different rewards. Pretty Woman actually became the highest grossing love story of this era because it turned the disappearance of the American middle class into a fairy tale. Many other romantic comedies told tales of class mobility where humble, honorable people managed to marry out of their dead end positions into yuppiedom. The 1988 classic Working Girl, for instance, the title winks yet again at the fundamental similarity of the business person and the sex worker. In the beginning, the working girl, secretary played by Melanie Griffith, must commute from Staten Island to work in a Wall Street office as a personal assistant to a pantsuited woman played by Sigourney Weaver. However, when an improbable series of events lead Melanie to impersonate her boss, she ends up landing a big deal. She also manages to steal her boss's fiance in the film, Harrison Ford. The final scene shows what happily ever after in a yuppie household looks like. Getting ready to leave for work in the morning, Melanie and Harrison wolf down their low-cal breakfast in a wordless ballet. As she pours his coffee, he pops the toast out of the toaster and sticks it in her open mouth. Calling an old-fashioned courtship, the scenery and setting of the parlor encouraged the fiction that love had nothing to do with economy. For bourgeois people, marriage was supposed to be a matter of spontaneous affinity. For others, it was supposed to propagate a community or bloodline. But as dating neared its centennial, the situation began to reverse. Dating came to be seen as another kind of transaction. Many people struggled to reconcile their desire to live efficiently with their desire to feel sexual desire itself. Shortly after the 1987 stock market crash, Newsweek reported that a new disorder was troubling the yuppie population. Psychiatrists and psychologists say they are seeing a growing proportion of patients whose main response to the sexual revolution had become "not tonight, dear." The Viennese psychiatrist Helen Kaplan, who had established the first academically credited sex therapy institute in the US, began to diagnose it as such. She called the problem inhibited sexual desire, or ISD. It was entered into the DSM-3 in 1988. Over the past decade, ISD has emerged as the most common of all sexual complaints. By varying estimates, anywhere from 20 to 50% of the general population may experience it at some time to some degree. It was known as the plague of the 80s. Against this backdrop, the sex worker starts to look like the prototype for a new woman who is expert in managing feelings, inspiring feelings, and repressing her own. This expertise allowed her to convert the desires of others into money, which was what any yuppie most wanted. She made feelings economically productive. In Pretty Woman, Julia Roberts lands Richard Gere by doing precisely this. Richard Gere admits to being a commitment phobe who has never left capable of falling in love. Friends Julia meets her, takes her to a horse race, emphasizing that he is universally desired. No one seems struck by the fact that his professed inability to have feelings qualifies him as a textbook sociopath. Richard Gere in the movie is handsome and eligible, and Julia seduces him by turning her own body into a commodity. In an early scene, she embraces him in his hotel, and she says, "So basically, we are talking about 88 inches of therapy wrapped around you for the bargain price of $3,000." When Richard returns a necklace that he had borrowed for her to wear after failing to man up and become her boyfriend, the jeweler sighs, "It must be hard to give up something so beautiful." It is those words equating Julia Roberts with the necklace that makes Richard realize that he has made a terrible mistake. He sprints away to get her back, scrambling up her fire escape just in time for the happy ending. Bret Easton Ellis' novel American Psycho came out several months after Pretty Woman. Whereas Pretty Woman was instantly beloved, American Psycho was and remains highly controversial. Several publishers dropped the manuscript before Vintage finally published it. But American Psycho basically tells the same story as Pretty Woman, only in the horror genre. Like Richard Gere, the protagonist is a wildly successful, handsome guy with a good pedigree who cannot feel anything without engaging in the service of sex workers. Richard Gere consumes Julia Roberts figuratively by letting him treat her body like a beautiful object. She helps him find in himself to feel love. Whereas in the other character, he literally murders and consumes the prostitutes that he sleeps with. When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, he jokes to a colleague, I think two things. One part wants to take her out and be real nice and sweet and treat her right. But the other part thinks about the fact that her head and what it would look like on a stick. Over the course of the novel, Bateman gnaws girls and yeah, I'm not going to read the rest of this. Let's just say American Psycho is the same genre as Pretty Woman, just in the horror section. So, the fact that we cannot quite be sure whether or not he really killed someone in the novel or whether he was just hallucinating should not reassure us for 1 minute. It was just another symptom of a terrifying kind of feelinglessness, the total devaluation of emotion in his world. American Psycho highlighted the dark underside of the dating market that said that what anyone wanted could be paid for, and once it was paid for, you became fair game. It exposed the yuppie as more than dysfunctional, he was satanic. Meanwhile, downtown, a real life nightmare was unfolding. So, what is the writer telling us? The writer is telling us that this whole scenario about dating could be a good thing, but because of the way that the dating sites operate, it becomes another way to dehumanize. It becomes another way to, as the writer here puts it, it becomes another way to see a person as a commodity rather than a soul that you're getting to know. So that is part of the danger of the dating apps, which is why I always tell people, if you're going to try that route, be careful. Be careful. I know that there's been several incidences of women, especially, who have met people online through the dating apps, and they have either come up missing, or they have been abused or beaten, or I know someone is recently dealing with an issue where they married someone really quickly, and it has affected their children because their children were abused by the person. So if you're choosing to use dating sites, we know that, again, 65% of all recent marriages have happened, right, as a result of an online meeting someone online. But you still need to be careful because, as the writer is alluding to, sociopaths and psychopaths also use dating apps. They also use online dating services. So I always tell people, if you're gonna go that route, make sure people know that you're going that route. Make sure that people are aware of who you're interacting with. You need to at least have one or two people that you're accountable to, so that people know who you're going out with. I mean, I know that people have this whole idea of everybody's in my business and I want people to stay out of my business and I got to keep stuff offline. Well, let me tell you something. Sometimes somebody knowing your business can save your life. All right? Exactly. Vouch for the person you're talking to. Do some background digging. Most of us have at least one family member that is a part of law enforcement of some kind. Have them run a background check. Meet meet their friends, do some interviews. But don't just go off and meet someone and don't tell anybody where you're going. Nobody knows you were using dating apps. Nobody knew you were on a dating site because you were trying to keep everything so quiet and on the down low that you're now putting yourself in, especially in the day and age in which we live, you're now putting yourself at risk for the enemy to have an open doorway into your life. And so the main thing with all of this is, can you use these sites? Sure, you can. But you also want to use wisdom. You also want to make sure that you look at safety issues first. And I'm saying this especially for women. I'm saying this especially for women because I know we are in a society right now that says, a part of waiting is positioning yourself. There's a lot of that talk going around, right? Where when God says, he that finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And what are women supposed to be doing in the meantime? And some people say, well, you can position yourself to be found. And they see that dating on online dating sites, they see it as a way that you can position yourself to be found. That may be true. But while you're positioning yourself to be found, you're also putting yourself out there to be found by people you don't want to find you. All right? And so that is the reality of it. Next week, we'll be in chapter 8, and we'll be in the chapter 8 called Protocol. Protocol. And so we're moving right on through. We're going to be talking about the 80s. We're going to be talking about STDs. We're going to be talking about HIV and how those things began to change how people thought about dating. All right? So be prepared for that. 11. Who is your rota? That's where we stopped last. Who is your rota? Remember, rota is the person who is considered your little one, or the person who is someone that you will encourage, who's coming behind you many times. Somebody that you may be coaching, somebody who may be looking to you as an example. All right, so that is who rota is as we continue this talk, and hopefully we'll finish rota today. Once, twice, 3 times a rota. Jesus weaves three mantles of spiritual maturity around our Rhoda relationships. One affirmation, he says, is this: let the little children come to me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. This occurs right after Jesus discusses and justifies his own childlessness and singleness. It is almost impossible for us to comprehend how truly and odd it might have seemed that a wifeless Jesus appeared in Judaic tradition. Although our fascination with the invention of stories of a married Jesus give evidence to how hard it is even for us to cope with his singleness. In a text Jesus would have read, Sirach or Ecclesiasticus says that a man without a wife is a fugitive and a wanderer. Every Jewish father was expected to arrange for his son after the age of 12 and before the age of 22 for him to be married. So, for an older, never have been married male to pick a child as an ideal of faith and to rebuke those who were trying to prevent children's inclusion in adult conversations, I tell you the truth, he says, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it, was a double oddness. The second time Jesus singled out a relationship with a child as the defining ideal for faith took place after the disciples were bickering with one another over who was the greatest. A disgusted Jesus picked up a child in his arms and said that our ability to receive a child and to become a child again was the true measure of greatness. Unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. If you're too old to hold a child in your arms or in your heart, you're too old to be alive. Be careful how you treat this child in your arms, Jesus warned. Children have specifically assigned angels who have walkie-talkies with the Father in heaven. The special status of children was reinforced a third time in one of the harshest warnings that Jesus ever uttered. He said this: if you harm a child or make a child stumble, it would be better if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depths of the sea. Enough said. What is it about childhood that is so vital to our entrance into the kingdom of God? Jerry Griswold has discovered what he believes is the secret to a successful children's book. After spending years studying the most influential children's books in history, he argues that the greatest are all alike in one simple way. The author could remember how it feels to be a child. From a key to classic children's literature to Jesus' keys to the kingdom, can you remember what it is like to be a child? Soren Kierkegaard came the closest to his perspective when he argued that there were only two good ways of reading stories to children. Either so live the stories that you own them in telling them and you become a child yourself, or you fake it by staging the story as if your life depended on it. Children need stories to stabilize and structure their existence. Only when the child himself detects that the teller does not believe the story are the stories damaging. Yet not because of the content itself, but because of the untruth in regard to the teller, because of the mistrust and suspiciousness with which the child gradually develops. The more storyless our culture, the more children will always be on the side of a good story. Phil Pullman, children's book author and winner of England's highest honor for children's literature, argued in his acceptance speech that the wisdom of Once Upon a Time determines more how we live and last longer than philosophy. What characterizes the best of children's authors is that they're not embarrassed to tell stories. They know how important stories are. Pullman ended his speech with these words: we don't need lists of rights and wrongs, tables of do's and don'ts. We need books, we need time, and we need silence. Thou shalt not is soon forgotten, but once upon a time lasts forever. What place do stories have in your life today? Are there any once upon a times, or have they all been shelved away so you can get on with more important things? Your rhoda can help you see the larger story, the larger act, the larger scene, and the larger curtain call. One of the most brilliant and beautiful, though humorous, writers of the 20th century, George Steiner, believes that the storylessness of the modern world is the cause of many of our problems. He argues that the worst thing you can do to a child is to deprive them of their stories, of their creativity, of their imagination, and especially of the spell of the story. He writes, to starve a child of the spell of a story or the canter of a poem, oral or written, is kind of living burial. If the child is left empty of text in the fullness sense of that term, he will suffer an early death of the heart and of the imagination. This is why I would rather literalists read the Bible to my children than liberals, and why the reproduction fate for liberal Christianity is so low. The spell has been broken by critical detachment and demythologicalized discourse. When your lips tell a story without your limbs, or if you remember a story but your body doesn't, then you communicate a dead story. This kind of romance with the text has all the excitement of kissing through a handkerchief. Martin Buber tells this story. My grandfather was paralyzed. One day he was asked to tell about something that happened with his teacher. He told how the saintly Balsham used to leap about and dance while he was at his prayers. As he went on with the story, my grandfather stood up. He was so carried away that he had to show how the master had done it, and started to caper about and dance. From that moment on, he was cured. This is how stories should be told. To be a Jesus follower means that the good news story, the grand narrative, is the story that has shaped, is shaping, and will shape our lives. A rhoda keeps a once upon a time alive and well and happily ever after something to be hoped for. The five recurring themes in Griswold's gem of a book finds in classic children's literature the 5 reasons why you need a rhoda as one of your witnesses. Think of them as spiritual disciplines needed in life that won't happen unless you have a rhoda. And when you learn them, you can pass them along to others, letting yourself be a rhoda to them. Your ongoing relationship with a rhoda will keep you snug, scared, small, light, and alive. True, those are not on the list of classic spiritual disciplines, but maybe they should be. Number 1, rhodas keep you snug. As a child, my favorite places were in the land of make-believe. I would put a teepee up on our front porch, and that became the mobile headquarters for Hannibal as he was crossing the Alps. It was where I could hide my 2 bandit brothers. It goes without saying that make-believe was also a costume carnival, with each of us dressed up to fit the part we were playing in our original fantasy games. My kids are no different today. Many just as soon as have a box as the prize inside it. UPS is another word for let's play make-believe, and the UPS truck is Santa's stack of cardboard boxes greeted as complex puzzles. Adults have their own hiding places in cardboard boxes. We might not use the UPS box, but we have boxes such as cabins in the woods, winter homes, summer rentals, spring break beach houses, each one a place where you can not only sleep in peace, but also daydream to your heart's content. It is that snugness that makes dreaming possible. Without the snugness of blankets at night, of shelter by day, dreaming is difficult and not safe. In this sense, every snug place is Plato's cave of ideas, wrote French philosopher Gaston Blanchard in his classic text, The Poets of Space. Just as we have a biological need to dream while sleeping, we have a spiritual need to dream while waking. Like our nocturnal dreams, these daydreams are shaped around narratives and metaphors that make sense of our lives. By night, you're a poet working. By day, you're a novelist, creating on the canvas of your life, imagination at play, a dream sequence of make believes, made in real narratives of attachment and abandonment. In keeping us dreaming, rotas unite our daydreams and our night dreams. God is both at work and at play in our lives. As adults, we tend to separate playtime from work time, making play a recess or a vacation from what is really important, the real world. For children, however, work and play are words used for the same thing under differing conditions, as Mark Twain would put it. When separated from our night dreams, our daydreams become more reveries than revolutions. In his novel, The Alchemist, Paul Coelho tells a compelling story about a young boy who is learning to follow his heart. The boy travels through the desert alongside a man who is simply identified as the alchemist. As they journey, the boy engages in a conversation with his heart. He learns that he, like everyone else, has a treasure waiting for him, and the heart's purpose is to encourage him to seek that treasure. But because people become preoccupied with so many other things, they no longer pay attention to their hearts. Only children who have yet to be distracted by life have the ability to hear their hearts in a clear way. The boy learns from the alchemist that because of the pain of going unheard, the heart will eventually stop telling people to follow their dreams. The boy pleads with his heart to never stop speaking to him. Should he begin to wander away from his dreams, he wants his heart to sound the alarm and promises that he will hear it and follow. Can you still hear your heart? If you're not snug enough, you can't feel its vibrations or hear its voice. Being able to listen to your heart and dream the dreams God has planted sound like good reasons to have and to be a rota. I have always studied to be simple. John Calvin saying a farewell to the pastors in Geneva. Lastly, for today, number 2, rotas keep you scared. A rota in your life keeps you playing boo games. This of which children's literature is made. Why? Because this is how children learn to face their fears. They learn to deal with witches and warlocks and wolves and Voldemorts and vampires, vultures, ogres, and stepmothers through stories. We all do, all through life. Monsters are real, not just those under the bed, but over the rainbow monsters. And we need to be able to face our own monsters and turn them into instruments of creativity and growth. Besides, you cannot become a hero without a villain. Selah. I wish I knew the name of the clever person who said, fear is the dark room that develops negatives into positives. Maybe it's because only in the dark can we process the negative emotions of dread, of anger, of worry. Maybe it's because of the thrill of soaring begins with the fear of falling, and we need to be pushed out of the dark, cozy nest to discover how far we can go. Maybe it's because the dark breeds ghost stories, and those goosebumps of enjoyment give us a heightened sense of being alive. Or maybe it's because the older we get, the easier it is to pretend to be something other than we are, and rotas scare the real you out of you. Whatever the reason, rotas rid us of the happy minded mania that denies the fragile hold we have on life and the hard won victories that come only to those scared enough to run the race. Folks without rotas in their lives see everything as a Thomas Kinkade painting. At first glance, it appears to be all light, but on further inspection, it's actually all trite. Rotas shoo the trite out of the room. Listen, this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. I want to thank you for tuning in to 2 very interesting topics today. Remember, I want you to think about what the writer is saying about having a person like Rhoda in your life. A person like Rhoda in your life is someone who is going to frighten you a bit. And most of us feel uncomfortable with those kinds of people in our life. And it's going to be somebody who is going to cause you to open up your creativity, your imagination, to get you thinking, to get you dreaming about possibility, right? One of the most powerful things that I saw in the writing today is the question, can you still hear your heart? Are you quiet enough at times, especially during your day? Are you shutting off all other sounds? Are you turning off your computer, your television, your music, your phone? There are times during the day that I turn my phones completely off. I don't want to hear a buzz. I don't want to hear a vibration. I don't want to hear a ding. I don't want to see an email pop up because I need time to be able to be quiet and listen to my heart and listen to what the Spirit of God is saying to my heart. So, the question for you today, can you still hear your heart? Because, as the writer said, some people lose the ability to hear their heart. And when you lose that ability, it will stop telling you to follow your dreams. Are we becoming dull of hearing? That's what you need to ask yourself today. Am I making time to hear the voice of God? Especially if you're frustrated and you feel like you don't hear God speaking to you. You got to slow down and ask yourself, I don't hear God speaking, but the larger question is, am I facilitating that? Do I have so much going on that I'm not allowing for God to speak to me? If I don't hear God speaking, I got to ask myself, am I creating the noise or am I creating the quiet by which I can hear God speak to my heart? All right? Only you can really answer that question because only you know what you have going on. All right? Our friends may know what's happening externally, right? But only you really know what you have going on internally. So I encourage you today, take some time, 30 minutes or more if you can, but at least 30 minutes to quiet yourself, turn off all other noise, and hear what God is saying to your heart. If you're in a place where you can write down what you hear God saying to your heart. If you listen and you write it down, then you can turn on your phone and you can record what God is saying to your heart. That way you have a record of it. Or do what I do sometimes. Email myself a note of what God has been saying to my heart. All right? Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. Be encouraged. Take care. And God bless. Thank you for tuning in today.